I'm Legends Kerrick, and I'm bringing you my second place deck list from the Peoria Regional that happened earlier this month. Yeah, you guys heard right. I was playing set 20, 21, otherwise known as Android 21, The Nature of Evil. It was really in a bid to try to get this leader banned. I think this leader still is way too good, and really prevents green and blue decks from flourishing in this game. For all the people here who actually came here to actually see a deck profile, let's just talk about my day real quick. So I played all 6 rounds. I opened the day into yellow Go tanks, which is a pretty fun match. I don't think I activated a single extra card in that matchup, so that made it pretty winnable. Then I played in a cooler mill, having played against Billy at Nationals, and then taken that home with me to do some homework and like VOD reviewing my matchups. I learned the cooler matchup really well after that with this deck, and so I made good work out of him, and then moved on to Green Goku. And I've said before, any green or blue deck is just severely unfavored into this deck. So I matched into him and took that W. I matched into Vegito X versus Vegito X. I quickly realized that I just have to mulligan for Peel Off Shu Mai. Like if I don't see it in my opening 6, I just hard mull all 6 for that card. And then since you don't have to attack them on your front side, it's a lot harder for them to get to their awakened condition. And it just so happened that both my Vegito X opponents just did not have much of an early game this event. Mostly because of Peel Off Shumai, but also because they just couldn't draw the cards that could out Peel Off Shumai, right? Like it's on your opponent to find an answer afterwards. And then my one loss of the day was round 5 again to Matt Sublet. Similar scenario where I had a win going into win a very positive matchup going into the matchup with him, but we just ran into time. And there was a slight confusion with how time was called, or when time was called at the top tables, and then shortly after time was called, overtime was called, and so we didn't get to take a turn. But it happens. I mean, it just taught me I gotta practice the deck more so I can learn my lines faster. You know, I've one of my favorite quotes that I like to tell people is I've never lost a game of any TCG where it wasn't my fault, right? So even if it's something like time like losing to time, then that just tells me I need to learn my play lines faster, and I need to watch my opponent for their play lines to make sure that we're playing at a better game pace. Right, because we did get to like 6 or 7 energy, so like it's not time that I lost to it. It's really just me. But yeah, that was my 6 rounds for Peoria. I can't remember if that was actually 6 or 7 rounds. Apologies, about a week ago at this point. But this deck was super fun. Not a single game felt like it was close. No disrespect to any of my opponents, but I think this deck is just really strong right now. I chose to take it instead of Tapion, which I actually do think is the best deck of the format because this deck just farms Tapion, right? And when I say Tapion's the best deck of the format, I'm saying like of the known format. There's of course going to be Rogue like 21 that can probably beat it. But this deck just feels obscenely strong, especially since some of the changes to the game have made it even better into red. So before it had like an unwinnable matchup into Gohanks, but now with the 10 card Z deck, it's just so much more better into Gohanks than it was before. Also, not having to rely on your turn 2 being a ramp play is actually really good. If you really think about it, you're only ramping 1 turn later. Anyway, so launching into this set 24 deck profile for Android 21, The Nature of Evil. Just quickly going over the leader. On the front side, you have a permanent that says you can't activate any extra cards. Note to take in, if you place a Z extra from your Z deck onto the battle area, that is not activating an extra card, so you can choose to do that on your front side if you'd like. I learned this because I went to go place one into my battle area versus the yellow Gotenks leader, and we checked with the judge to confirm that that does not trigger the Gotenks auto to draw a card. So it's not activating that Z extra. Anyways, afterwards, there's an auto that doesn't matter anymore, but it says if you have an Android 21Z battle card in play at the end of the turn, you will switch one of your energy to active mode. Obviously, that was there for when we had the 2-drop Z battle card, but that is banned, and unfortunately does not slow down this deck at all. I kind of, in some ways, this is really weird of me to say this, but in some ways it actually kind of helps the deck because it streamlines our early game, and it doesn't allow for that opening anymore where people can counterplay our 2-drop and ruin us by 1 turn. And then it has this activate main, which is the most important part. You must take a life to use this activate main, but once you do, you can look at the top 5 cards of your deck, add 1 blue android, no energy cost requirement to your hand, then shuffle your deck. And then finally, your awakened condition, like most really, really powerful decks that they couldn't afford to give a second awakened condition to, is simply at 4 life, you will draw 1, untap 1. The backside, here's what makes her so good. Uh, the permanent that specifically that makes her so good is you can choose to use your opponent's battle cards and or unisons as energy to cast your Android 21 cards, whether that be from the Z deck or from your hand. As a caveat, her other permanent says you cannot use skills to play anything, any kind of battle cards. So that means no overwhelms. You can't use any activate mains or activate battles to play any battle cards. But that permanent is only live on your turn. So that kind of balances the fact that you're kind of paying for full for all of your 21 cards, except you're not really because you're using your opponent's cards as energy. And then finally, the activate main once per turn is you can draw a card, and then afterwards you can choose up to 3 of your opponent's battle cards and or unisons, and switch them to active mode so you can use them as energy. Oftentimes this results in you paying 2 for like a draw 2 double strike, or a board clear 2 creatures and ramp 1, or like paying maybe 4 or 5 at the most for your 8 drop bomb. If you play into blue or green though, that like drastically changes, right? Because now you could be paying upwards of 0 for some of these cards, which is really, really unfair. Versus U7, for example, especially because they're playing that Purunga SCR a lot when they go in for their kill turn. That Purunga now counts as a green energy for our 21 counterattack, right? So now our counterattack only costs 2 if they have another creature. And then if we have the 4-drop blocker from the Z deck, that counterattack really only costs 1. I actually forgot to mention that about that first tournament. You can also use your Android 21 Z battle cards as energy to cast your 21 cards as well. So that's pretty cool. So quickly going to the deck profile. So this is our biggest change after Pan got nerfed and is only usable in SH, I think, Gohan deck. This is Android 21 Mandatory Gathering. Notably, if you're playing versus blue, this is a free card if you use one of their cards to pay for it, because it is a 21, it costs 1 blue. On play, it looks at top 5 for a Android, 5 costs or less. Blue Android, I believe, 5 costs or less. And then at the end of your opponent's next turn, you give him a clone token. That's what's so important about this card. So Pan was really useful because it gave your opponent a blue energy to play with. This card's really useful because it gives your opponent a card, a creature that can't really connect with your leader after you've awakened, and you can now use that as energy. And then has a second auto. When you combo with this card from your hand, it creates a clone token immediately on your opponent's side of the field. So it's pretty cool. This is a card you definitely want to play turn 2, and probably never cast it again for the rest of the game. So why not turn 1? Well, if you play it turn 1, your opponent will awaken you too fast, and they'll push you past your 4 life threshold. If you play it after turn 2, people will use Koitsukai to punish you for creating the token on their side of the field afterwards. So you definitely want to play it on turn 2, and then get that token going into your turn 3. If your opponent chooses to Koitsukai on their turn 2, that means they're not actually aggressing you, and it's very, very okay to just lose 2 cards for that token. Because if you think about it, this card already replaced itself with the card it searches, and it itself is a card. So like those are the 2 cards you're losing for Koitsukai anyway. Along with that, we have our other sweep 1-drops, if I can find them. It's the 4 Pilaf Shumai and 4 Android Speedy Substitution. So these are obviously the opening cards you're looking for in your mulligan, which is kind of nice in this deck. I mean, this deck never really has been mulligan heavy, but typically if I see one of these in my opening hand, I'll just keep my hand due to the new DBS mulligan. Unless, of course, I'm playing against a matchup where I really want Pilaf Shumai Cunning Trio. So I'm talking about matchups like Vegito X or Yellow U7. And even in some cases like Gohanks, if you can go first into Gohanks and you can you can find Peel Off Shumai, it kind of costs them 2 cards to awaken, so that's kind of nice. But yeah, these are just your opening turn 1 and turn 2. Typically, I'll play one of these on turn 1. If I'm versus one of the aforementioned decks, I'll just hold this and play nothing on turn 1. And then just use this as my turn 1 play on their turn. But otherwise, I'll play one of these on turn 1 and probably 2 more of them on turn 2. Since you really don't have a turn 2, right? Like you're just sculpting your hand for these first 2 turns. You're searching, maybe generating a couple peel off Shumais, and you're really just letting yourself get down to 4 life. Of course, people are going to try to push you down to 3. That's where you might have to use a super combo or an 8 drop or some combination of comboing these cards to get out of them. I would be careful about comboing with this card before you get to 4 because then your opponent's just going to use the token and hit you in the face with it, pushing you past down to 3, and then the whole purpose of comboing this card was just moot. But the rest of these are really good, right? And then at some point in your first 2 turns, you're going to want to generate 2Z energy, preferably by using these cards on the field as combo power. That way you can use your ramp play on turn 3. And then, of course, we play 3 copies of this card strictly for a check land. I think in my entire career of playing this card in this deck, I've used its effect to search once, and I've used its effect to arrival twice. Both times without very good effect, or very good results, the arrival. But it really is just your check land of the deck. Ideally, you want to open one of these at 12 cards, and then a copy of this, and then you want to search a couple more copies of this. You need at least 2 green energy to play your deck for the rest of the game. So that's mainly the reason why you don't want to search with these. Obviously, if you're in a dire situation, you're like, man, I'm gonna die unless I find a super combo or I find a floodgate. Then you use these to search, right? So do with that as you will. Make that decision in the middle of your game. But otherwise, these are just dedicated check lands. We'll talk about the mid-range beaters of the deck. So a couple copies of Android 21 Total Audacity. Just all 4. I found myself siding one out quite often, but this is a 50 card flat list. I want to see my super combos and my SCR as often as possible every game, especially that SCR. It's pretty significant in swinging a game. And the SCR is actually what makes this deck so powerful in this format. We'll go over that when we talk about the SCR. But Total Audacity, it's typically you pay 2 blue on your turn for it, and you use 2 of your opponent's creatures as the 2 non-committed energy. And then for 2 blue energy, you're effectively getting a draw 2 double strike, which already is really good pressure. And if your opponent already is at 4 life, then I would typically combo one of these 5Ks behind it to make it a 25K double. That way your opponent can't just give you a super combo to get out of the attack. Plus, if you already have a 5K developed on the field, then it's definitely worth comboing behind this. Then you just get uber value. Your opponent's probably going to take those 2 damage. Or you're just starting to win the resource trade because you drew 2 cards and they had to give up a super combo plus a card. And then, of course, at the end of your opponent's turn, this generates a clone token, and that's probably why we don't play this card more than once a game, because you probably resolve it on turn 3 or 4, and then afterwards your opponent has enough energy to start using Koitskai and hitting you in the face, right? Like turn 3 or 4, they can probably use Koitskai and then not do much behind that, because you're going to constantly keep their board clear. But afterwards, they're going to have access to Koitskai. Of course, Koitskai does punish you for generating the clone token at the end of their turn. So expect to probably only resolve this card once on turn 3 or 4, and then once again when you're about to end the game for an extra double strike reach. Bad Omen, still kind of nuts. The fact that it's only 2 dedicated energy, 1 blue, 1 green, means you can typically resolve 2 to 3 in a game if you were playing multiples in your deck. I still chose to just play the 1. It's just a card I want to end the game with, but there is a version of the deck where you play 4 copies of the card, and by like turn 4 or 5, you just start burning for 2 or 3 to end the game, which is not a fun way to play the game. But I guess a W is a W, right? And then finally, we'll talk about the boss monsters of the deck. This is Android 21. Ceaseless Despair. This is actually what makes this deck so powerful, right? You're paying 5 for it to tap out. Right, tap out, and then using 3 of your opponent's creatures, or more if they're playing blue or green. It board wipes the entire board ignoring barrier. The only thing it doesn't kill is indestructible, of course. And then it taxes your opponent for trying to use a counter attack, right? And then behind that, it's also a 25k double duel. So it's always ripping cards out of your opponent's hands. Whether they counter or not, they're either losing life and or cards, right? That's a really unfair effect to me. I board wiped, meaning all my attacks are going at your face anyway, and because they're going at face, you're going to have to defend, but you don't want to defend with counters because then you're just going to lose your whole hand. But then even if you do defend with counters, most of the floodgates don't really affect this deck. Let's just think about it. Like, if you Nimbus this, you lost 4 cards, and then it's going to go in for a second swing. If you go Explosive Dance, it's going to swing. I'm going to swing with Leader, combo another copy of it, and then swing again. If you swing with, like, if you negate with Riposte, I'm going to swing again, tap my leader. Like, this card's going to get through and it's going to get value. So that's what makes this card so strong. Plus, I think a lot of people have forgotten about siding the cunning cards, which is probably good because there's no other decks out there to really cunning. And then in our best attempt to masquerade as Gamma, we played 8 floodgates in the deck. So 4 copies of Defending Friends, which is typically online by turn 3 or 4. Even sometimes as early as 2 if I need to, and then 4 copies of Full Power Counter. So we'll go over Defending Friends first. If I feel like I'm against an aggressive matchup, I will, on turn 2, instead of playing a second or a third cantrip, I will use the second energy on turn 2 to create a 1 energy Z battle card so that this is live immediately. By turn 3, you've already created your Android 21 4-drop, meaning you now have an indestructible and or barrier card, depending whichever one you need for the matchup. And now that becomes the reason why this card is on immediately. So this card just has immediate access. Full power counter in most matches costs you 3 of your energy or 2 of your energy plus your what I call a mana dork, so your Android 21Z battle card, and then one of your opponent's creatures to play. This is another unfair floodgate. Also, most counterplays don't hit this card because it is a 4-drop and it is 25k, so it skirts around Koitsukai. It's one of the sickest things about this deck, Bandai, is Koitsukai doesn't even stop the deck, right? Like, if you Koitsukai the deck, instead of getting Defending Friends, you're going to get hit by a full power counter and then a Sensu Bean, and then your turn's over anyway, so you just wasted energy to do nothing. And then if you don't Koitsukai, you're going to get Defending Friends, and then you're going to get outvalued by tokens. Like, it's... Come on, Bandai. Okay, moving forward, we got our Super Combo Sweep. We're playing 3 copies of Android 8 Kind-Hearted Machine, and then 1 copy of Zeno Edge of Space. Zeno Edge of Space is because since we do consistently ramp 1 card every game, this is just to pick up our SCR or something important in case we ramp it. Also allows us to charge some one-offs early game so we can pick them up later. And of course, this is just a searchable draw 1 super combo. I think moving forward, in every blue and yellow deck I play, I'm going to play 1 copy of the blue-yellow Kefla super combo while U7 is still in the meta. That way, if they ever do tap you out, you can just super combo away their 6-drop. And they burn their whole turn to not kill you, right? Like, that's pretty brutal. Like, if they spend 6 mana to play Purunga, Goku, and 6-drop swing once with 6-drop, you like Kefla super combo, take it, and then bottom deck their 6-drop, like the game's over. So, I think moving forward in every blue and yellow deck, I'm going to play 1 copy of that card. Standard, Majin Buu. You do fly through your deck, and you have a Zeno in case you ramp it, so you are probably going to see your Buu. I think I saw him in like 3 out of my 6 matches that day. He just does mad work in his deck. Since you naturally have floodgates anyway, so Buu typically lasts for more than a turn in this deck. 1 Bean. This card's kind of horrible in this deck. It's really just there for the Koitsukai turns. You're not really beaning up to do much. My signature 1 UI Kamehameha. Typical for Dimension Magic, which is just more powerful in a deck that has cards that plays on your opponent's turn. 2 copies of Oob. I know a lot of players like aren't about this card at more than 1. This is one of the decks where I do think it is better at more than 1. It's just because you really only have 4 threats in the entire deck. The 8-drops are your only real threats. The 4-drop Double Strike's kind of a low threat, and then the full power counter is also kind of a low threat. So I don't really count this. This card is a true threat, though. Gives the deck another way to board wipe in case your opponent's expecting you to tap down for 5. Instead, you can do this, and you can punish them for, playing the game like normal. 2 copies of Sun Gohan Power Reclaim. You do untap 5 at the end of your turn with the 8-drop. So when you do that, you just are looking for stuff to do with your energy. Full power counter is typically a good way to do it, but that only uses 3 of your energy, so what if you demagic after that? Then you have access to Sun Gohan Power Reclaim to remove another attacker and give you another threat going into your turn. Also, just versus Green Goku, the auto where you can Z it and then pay 1 to get rid of their Goku dual attacker is really good. 1 copy of Turning the Tide, because we're a ramp deck and a control deck. Also, this card's still really, really lame. Okay, the real reason why this deck is also a really good contender for this format is just it's the best deck to play Transcendental Predator, the 21 SCR. Right? It comes into play, it then eats your opponent's board, and then if you chose or targeted 4 or more cards to include unisons and or battle cards, you heal 1 for every 2, which is insane. Up to a max of 2, right? So, like, think about the decks that are being played right now, right? You have U7, which is going to have a couple servants on the field, which gives you free energy. You have Vegito and Son Goku, which both rely on a Z unison to function, and this just eats them both up real quick. And then you have Gohanks, which typically also runs a baby unison, as well as a decently wide board, which gives you energy and stuff to eat up. Now, we were concerned when Pan got removed from the game that we wouldn't be able to get to the 4 battle card count pretty often to heal the 2, but that's just incorrect. With the Mandatory Gathering added to the deck, paired with the Total Audacity, like generating tokens onto your opponent's board to be able to suck them up for the heal has actually been never been easier, right? Like Pan, you had to spend an energy to do it, but it came at the benefit of a draw. Mandatory Gathering, you just combo from your hand on a different attack to give them a token, and then now that they have 4 creatures, you use Transcendental Predator to eat them all and heal the 2. And then if you are picking up the deck, I wouldn't worry about the block. Nothing blocks in this format anymore, so I'd probably just go for the 2 swings to get the tempo and the pressure. Your opponent's probably going to have to either Floodgate, which feels bad because you heal 2 and now they're losing cards for their Floodgate, or more likely than not, they're just going to take the 2 damage, which now puts you in the driver's seat to probably end the game coming up soon. So, in my mind, the way I read this card, it's a board clear for 2 energy typically. It's a board clear. It also heals 2 life, which eventually becomes a draw 2, and then it deals 2 damage. You can't do much better for an SCR. And then if you already have the Z extra developed, this card costs 1 of your own energy sometimes, and that's gross. Come on, Bandai, do better. Finally, my last tech is 1 copy of Android 17 and 18 teaming up the Unison from Gamma. Like I said, we're just trying to cosplay Gamma in this deck. But no, really, it's this card is a late game card, so I don't play it on 2, right? We're really looking to play it on turn 4 or 5, where it over the course of your turn and your opponent's turn, it generates 2Z, which is what's important about it. And it's a small threat, right? Like it's a small enough threat that your opponent has to dedicate some resources towards clearing it. Either by an attack, in which case for 2 energy you got 2 energy or you got 2 Z energy and a counter attack out of it, or through like something like Smokey, in which case you traded 2 energy, got 2 Z, and your opponent lost 2 energy for 1 Z. If they even get to Z their Smokey, right? So in every like scenario where this card actually gets some applicable use, it was a favorable trade. So why do we care about Z energy now that we didn't back when Nats and Worlds were around? Well, we have a 10 card Z deck now. And a lot of our, like if you remember me mentioning, I'm playing 2 oobs just because we don't have enough threats to finish out the game. Well, a lot of our game ending threats are in our Z deck. So speaking of that, let's dive into our Z deck, right? Typical clone tokens. I'm too poor to afford the cool ones, so I have 2 backup clone tokens. 1 shadow token for our Z extra. And then we just have your typical Son Goku Strong Together. I probably never play this card unless my opponent has a hand that's 14 or bigger, and I have nothing else to do with my turn. I'm probably not gonna. That will probably be the only scenario where I play this card. Because if my opponent has 3 or more card or 13 or more cards, then I'm only taking 3 cards for 2 energy, but I'm not developing anything, right? So that's like a tempo loss. By the same margin, I could play like an Oob for the same amount of energy, draw cards that replaces itself, right? And then I've developed a 30k my opponent has to deal with. It's pressure, so my opponent has to spend a card to get out of the attack or just take the damage, which is better than just chopping down their hand. But this is just in there mainly because it has barrier, and we'll talk about that later. 1 copy of Cell. This is not a great card for this format. 1 copy of Jiren. Definitely one of the reasons why we're playing teaming up, so we can set up Jiren to snipe Z Unisons and Unisons in general. So that's pretty cool. 1 copy of Dr. Gero Android Creator. This could probably be the baby if you wanted to, but I wanted to put myself in a position to self-awaken if I really needed to. So we talked about that turn 2 line where, like on turn 2, if I really need to set up Defending Friends, this is typically the Z battle card I create. It's got Barrier and Deflect, so it's coming down onto the field. And then if I need to, I can bottom deck a green card to take a life and draw a card. But like I said, we're really just setting up Defending Friends with this card. It also has Barrier, leaving into the pool of things that my Z extra or Z battle card 21 can eat. 1 copy of Beerus. This is definitely one of our threats for the mid to late game. So versus Blue, really good threat. Clears a lot of their bombs while pushing through Boo, so that's pretty fun. 1 copy of Vegito, another game-ending threat. 2 copies of the best Z card in this deck. Android 21 in the Name of Hunger. Typically, it costs you 2 blue to play this card. 2 of your own energy and then 2 of your opponent's creatures, which then will allow you to clear both of those creatures by Z-stacking one of them and bottom decking the other one. And of course, you'll Z-stack one of these 3 cards, either the Zamasu, Dr. Gero, or Goku underneath, depending on the scenario that you need. So the Zamasu if you need Indestructible, the Dr. Gero or Goku if you need Barrier, and then sometimes even I'll pick the Vegito so that it can have barrier, but switch to a triple strike when I need it to be a triple strike. Especially oftentimes versus like Vegito X or Son Goku green, I'll absorb the Vegito, bottom deck their blocker, especially if it's in Son Goku, and then now their Unison goes to 3. I'll just take the triple strike from this and then kill the Unison in one go, and that really only cost me no cards out of my hand, 1 card out of my Z deck to clear their entire turn 2 or 3. And then 1 copy of Black Kamehameha. This card like never comes up. There's like a cute line where if you have to awaken, you have no 1-drop to play from your hand. You can choose to play this from your Z deck and then awaken, but then like you're down 1 Z energy, which you needed to do this. So I don't really recommend it. If you have literally nothing to do and you're gonna untap 5 anyway, then like this is another line that you can do. So just be creative with it. If like I said on turn 3, your preferred line is to be able to awaken and then play this to ramp and then leave 1 up for defense, and you're going to start your next turn with 5 energy, which just shoots you really far ahead of the competition. That's a 10 card Z deck for 21. We'll quickly talk about the side deck. Side decks always differ depending on the meta and what you think is going to be there, so don't take my side deck as gospel. In true fashion, I like to play a bunch of one-ofs, especially in decks that draw a lot or can't afford to see 2 copies of the card that I'm playing 1 copy of. So Smoke Dragon's a good example of that. I don't want to see 2 black cards, and I want to limit the amount of non-blue/blue-green cards I can ramp off the top of my deck with my Z battle card. I actually did ramp in a black smoke in in one of my matches, and it was madly irritating. 1 copy of Mafuba for green or for red Gohanks, future Gohan slash Trunks. It also has a few applications versus green. You can cover their green Goku 8-drop. A couple copies of Android 21 Wavering Will. This is strictly for green. I do side 1 copy of Mafuba and 1 copy of Wavering Will in versus Vegito X. 1 copy of Blue Gotenks. This is a respect card for U7. If I get to go second, that means I have the energy marker and I just hold Zeno for the rest of the game along with this card, and I never die to the 6-drop ever again. Especially if they go for the Purunga line, so that's pretty cool. I think I'm going to cut this in the future just by playing the aforementioned Kefla super combo to insulate against that matchup. 1 copy of Perfect Force Cell. It's just an alternative to 28 to Turning the Tide. So, like, if your opponent knows you're playing Turning the Tide and they're a slow enough deck that they can afford to play Jiren, you just take out their Turning the Tide, put in Perfect Force Cell. Your Speedy Substitution still searches out this card, which is really nuts. And you just tap 7 for it, man. 1 copy of Sensu Bean for in case Jiren shows up or one of those wide aggro decks show up. 2 copies of Tapion for the Gogeta matchup. It also has applications. I side 1 copy of it versus Green Goku. Actually, just versus Green in general. So when they do play the Green Goku and I floodgate them out of attacking twice, on my turn I can pay 2, attack him once with the Tapion, -2 to blank the skills of the Goku, and then remove it through a different card. Or if I really need to, I can pay 3 and then just -2 on my opponent, or -2 to take the Goku without having to discard cards. 2 copies of Deborah for green, of course. 1 copy of Hit in case I saw in the mirror match, and for Mekikabra and for Beerus. How it works versus Beerus is you wait until they get to their turn 15, not the turn 15, sorry, 15 energy, and then they typically hold a Pachiak if you weren't able to force it before then. Either way, if they're on 15 energy, they're going to win next turn most of the time, regardless of what you're going to do. So you slam down Meki for 4, or whatever it is for 2, and then you flip them down so they can't tap 16 and end the game next turn. So you bought yourself another turn. And then if they can't kill the Meki or the Hit, you just push them on their next turn, force them to flip, and then flip them right back down, yeah? And then 3 copies of Koitsukai because I'm not going to lose the cooler ever again. Also, it's really has applications versus Tapion, has applications in the mirror. You just be creative with the card. It has applications a lot of places. that's the entire 65 plus Z deck. If you have any questions about the deck, I would love to talk to you guys about the deck. The deck is nowhere near dead. It definitely feels as strong as ever, if not stronger than it was when I ran it for Natch/Worlds. Mandatory Gathering was a card we couldn't afford to play before because Pan was just so good. But now Mandatory Gathering just adds another layer to the deck that allows you to do some really cool stuff that your opponent can't really prepare for, right? Like even if your opponent clears the board, through Mandatory Gathering, you can just create cards for them so that it gives you free energy, right? Like it's just kind of unfair. Yeah, that was my Andrew 21 deck profile from Peoria. I got second with it. Um, it was really fun to play. And it was really fun to meet you guys. I met a bunch of people out there. I signed a couple cards. Got to say hi, talk shop with a lot of new faces, which is awesome. I love to see this game grow, and all the new people that I keep running into. It's really awesome to see you guys get into what I consider probably the most complicated TCG out there. So it is going to be on myself and all of my friends and my teammates to try to make this game as easy as it is to learn as we can through our channel, right? Like we're going to go through all of our decisions, and we're going to try to make that transition into this game for y'all a lot easier. Anyway, as usual, shout out to all the people that I get to test with. That includes my Fort Walton Beach crew and the rest of my team, Checkmate Fusion. Shout out to the guys I got to travel with this time. It was an awesome time hanging out with you guys. If you guys haven't traveled to an event yet, do it. And then make sure you like look ahead and find some really cool place to eat with your friends, because that's like the best part. You get to go out to dinner with your friends in a city or state wherever that you've never been to or somewhere far away, and it's just like vacation. That's so cool. And of course, yeah, dude, shout out to you guys. Thanks for always watching. I know my deck profiles go a bit long, but I try to put as much information in there as I can for you guys. Um, so definitely shout out to you guys. Thanks for making this game super fun to play. I'll catch you guys at the next event.